is Shayne Frate, and for my project, I decided to explore the topic of the history and geomorphology of floodings in Southbury. This is a topic that is personal to me as I lived in Southbury for many years, and I got to know and love the area. The town is beautiful, but unfortunately over the years, it has experienced hardships with flooding. Last August, 2024, Southbury, Connecticut experienced major flooding that damaged roads, homes, and local infrastructure. Traveling from point A to B was almost impossible as so much of the town was damaged from the flooding. Roads were collapsed and underwater, houses were torn down, and so much damage was done to the surrounding area. Even Newtown, the town right over from Southbury, experienced some impacts of the flooding, and a few of the roads near my dad's house collapsed, leaving many people unable to get around. This is an image I took today on May 7th, 2025, as I was driving through Southbury, and it shows that the subway building that was shown on the previous slide that was severely damaged from the flooding is still damaged and not being used to this day. Here are a few images that were captured by family members and by people in my town. Some of the images were posted on the news as well, and many were circulating around social media platforms like Facebook the days following the flood. This collapsed bridge in particular caused a huge disruption in traffic patterns. A lot of the surrounding roads by Southbury also looked like this. According to the Hazard Mitigation Plan, areas that are close to the Pomperaug River, the Chepaug River, Lake Zor, Lake Lilinoa, and low-lying roads and bridges that are repeatedly damaged during storms are very vulnerable to flooding. The text also states that many residential neighborhoods in Southbury are built with cul-de-sacs, which is a problem during flooding as it can limit roadway connectivity. It complicates emergency response and evacuation and could potentially trap residents where they are. The report identifies these cul-de-sacs as land use design concerns and suggests that future planning for building decisions should consider connecting roadways and avoiding putting cul-de-sacs, especially in high-risk zones, which I personally think is a great idea. Through my own experience of living in Southbury, I lived on a very steep hill close to the Housatonic River, so my old house has never been impacted by flooding as the water always traveled downward toward the river. But in steep terrain, such as those who live in Naugatuck Valley, roads can flood quickly and can create hazardous conditions for those living in that area. The Hazard Mitigation Plan also states that Southbury has a number of measures in place to prevent and mitigate flood damage, including certain regulations, codes, and ordinances. It is also now forbidden to develop in floodplain areas, as that could increase the area's flood risk. This information was found from Naugatuck Valley Council of Governments from 2022. Floodplains are natural drainage areas, and in the textbook on page 482, it states that during floods, a stream may overtop the banks of its channel and spread out over its floodplain, a broad, flat area bordering the stream. Floodplains are low, flat areas that form over time due to a river overflowing. In Southbury, when tributaries, which are basically a body of water that feeds into another larger body of water, such as the Pomperaug River, flood, the water can spread out over the floodplains and cause massive damage to infrastructure in the town, as we saw in last year's flooding. Floodplain zones can also temporarily slow down flooding, which can help to reduce the impact to the community and infrastructure. But the floodplain can accumulate new layers of sediment, which can change the soil composition and shape of the land surface, also known as topography, which may also impact how the future floods may behave. Understanding floodplains is important when addressing the risk associated with floods and can help with predicting where floods are going to occur in the future. According to the National Geographic Society, floodwater can also change the surrounding landscapes through erosion. So, while floods can cause massive damage to towns, roads, etc., they can also have major impact on landscapes, which can be seen in Southbury. As rivers overflow, their banks can erode and collapse, widening the channel and also possibly altering its path. The eroded material is carried by the floodwater, increasing the amount of sediment suspended in the water. The text also mentions that eventually sedimentation occurs, which is when the suspended sediment eventually settles, which can potentially clog streams and riverbeds, destroy habitats, and alter aquatic organisms. According to the Hazard Mitigation Plan, it states that floodwaters can also carry ice, which can severely impact the landscape, riverbanks, riverbeds, and housing. With the flooding also comes the potential for surrounding landscapes to be littered with things such as residential materials, fallen branches, poles, cars and other human items, mud, pieces of buildings, etc., which happened in the flooding in August. From the lecture, we learned a lot about erosion and how many natural disasters and natural life processes can cause erosion, which can also be applied to floodings. With the fast-moving waters, riverbanks can be eroded, which can lead to collapsed land, changes in the land surrounding, and formation of new water features, which is especially true in areas with meandering rivers. On page 487 of the textbook, it reinforces this idea by stating that waters traveling down a stream erode the sides of the stream, causing it to flow faster and grow more pronounced until it becomes a meander. The text also states that the curves of the meander erode and eat away at the channel wall, creating something called a cut bank, which is basically just the outer bank of the meander that's being eroded due to the water flow. This is visible along the Pomperog River in Southbury as the river features meanders along its course. As erosion and sedimentation continue with each flood event, the town of Southbury's landscape becomes changed, with shifting river paths, new deposition zones, and increased vulnerability in floodplain zones. Also, relating this back to the course, we talked about natural occurrences such as creeps and lahars, and watched videos of how it impacts the land around it. And while they are similar to flash floods in terms of landscape altering processes, they're different with the time scale of events. Flash floods are often extreme and rapid, while creeps are slow and gradual. One last thing to point out in terms of the landscape in Southbury is that there are surrounding tributaries that drain into the Housatonic River, such as the Pomperog River and the Chippewa River. During heavy rainfall or when snow melts, etc., the tributaries collect the water runoff from the steep terrain of the Naugatuck Valley, and because the rivers in Southbury are narrow, they fill and flood very quickly. According to Spiegel 2024, in thousands of dams in Connecticut pose risks and challenges. One thing with rivers is that they transport both water and sediment. As stated earlier, sedimentation that comes with flooding can alter the natural layering of the soil and sediment, and sometimes can mix organic and inorganic material. Also, with accelerated erosion comes more fine sediments such as sand, silt, and clay that can be introduced to the water system and transported downstream. This can especially be seen near the Pomperog and Chippewa River, especially after last year's flood. According to page 199 of the textbook, this process is explained. During a flood, the water runs faster, and pebbles and sand are carried downstream, creating a layer of sandy gravel that forms over the silt layer. Then, when the flooding subsides, more silt buries the gravel. If the succession of the sediment becomes lithified and later exposed for us to see, it appears like alternating beds of sandy conglomerate and siltstone. After the flooding last August in Southbury, we could see fine silt and mud on the streets, sidewalks, and grass, which was sediment from the flooding being deposited. Drainage systems were also clogged by the movement of sediments, as things like gravel and organic debris were washed into the drainage systems. When I was driving around after the flooding, I saw sand, gravel, large sticks, and a bunch of other debris all over the place, and it took the town a while to clean up the debris. Without any formal research going into this question, I think the answer is pretty straightforward. The short-term effects of the Southbury flooding include things like infrastructure damage, contamination of the water, displacement of organic materials, tree damage, etc. A bunch of things that I saw when I was living there. But some long-term effects may include things like changes in the soil composition as floods add new layers of sediment, long-term ecosystem imbalances, and for some, home displacement. According to the National Geographic Society, floodings can have major negative impacts on wildlife, such as habitat destruction, which is true for the floodings of Southbury of last year. Unpredictable floods, or flash floods, such as the one in Southbury last year, can negatively harm aquatic life and smother aquatic organisms. One example is that fish can be displaced and their nests can be destroyed. It can also impact the quality of the water, as it may carry pollutants and sediment that can negatively impact aquatic life. In the course, we heavily discuss mass extinction events, but it's important to note that mass extinctions are very different than simply something going extinct. A mass extinction is a large-scale event, with many species going globally extinct. Extinction refers to the disappearance of a single species. With floodings, extinction can be a possibility, but really only for a species that's limited to one area, or for species that are already threatened by extinction by other factors. So the floodings in Southbury caused wildlife stress, but did not lead to any extinctions, and definitely did not lead to any mass extinctions. As we all know, climate change is a very real issue that's impacting every part of the Earth. If climate change continues to unfold as it's currently unfolding, we can most likely predict things such as more frequent and intense flooding in Southbury, which can lead to more erosion and massive changes in the landscape, habitat displacement, less biodiversity, etc. In 500 plus years, due to flooding, Southbury will most likely have permanent changes to the landscape due to repeated flooding. The repeated flooding can also cause altered river paths and additional layers of sediment buildup, reshaping the area of Southbury. Floodings are more than simply a natural disaster. They set the stage for future changes and transformations of the earth.